Welcome to the Kings Beat podcast. I am James Ham, your Kings insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. Joining me, Mr. Brenden Nunes from the Kings Herald and the Kings Pulse podcast. Brenden, what's going on? You're learning on the fly.
I am. It's been a crazy couple days. A lot of new experiences for me this season and ending the season and talking to all these guys for the last time until next year or maybe the last time and who knows how long in some of these cases is, yeah, definitely a new experience. Learning on the fly for sure.
Yeah, it's been a wild few days since we last saw you. I we we started like a major tussle between the Sacramento Kings and Dante DiVincenzo and his camp. That certainly happened on Thursday's show. The Kings went 1-1, split their final two games with the Los Angeles Clippers, and they came away with a win to finish the season against the Phoenix Suns. Alvin Gentry's been fired. A bunch of other people have been fired. Chaos has ensued. This is welcome to Sacramento Kings basketball, a tradition like no other. Brenden, let's just number one, we'll get this out of the way. If you're watching on YouTube, jump down, give us a thumbs up, give us a subscription if you can. Jump on board with the Kings Beat. We're doing crazy work. We're going to be doing all kinds of amazing stuff all summer long. So kingsbeat.com, or you can go down below in the description and find all of that stuff as well. Go on and get a premium subscription to the Kings Beat, so then that way you get an invite to next week's happy hour. I think it's going to be on Thursday. Still lining up a guest, but it'll be a good one like always. And the happy hours are the bomb. And that's for premium subscribers only. And it's like slightly more than a gallon of gas for you to become a premium subscribers per month. It's $7 per month. It's a great deal, and you're supporting independent content that me and Brenden are producing here nonstop. So let's get to this because we have so much ground to cover. It is a wild couple of days in Sacramento, and that's because the expected happened, but it's still different, right? When you're in the middle of it. Alvin Gentry has been told he will not be back as head coach. There will be a full-fledged coaching search. Just Brenden, this is your first time going through this. Just why don't we start there? What has your last 72 hours been like?
It's probably a lot of figuring out how to approach this when it comes to interviewing these guys. And, there is a little bit of a game to it of getting them to answer questions without maybe being the most... It's not direct, but there's just certain ways that you have to ask things. And I think that it's been a learning process for me at this final stage for sure, because it's just different than how we're asking questions throughout the entire regular season. And seeing Alvin let go, and my dog decides this is a good time to start chewing on her toy. You see Alvin let go, and it's just another situation of like, we were just talking to him 2 days ago, and then you hear that he's no longer or he's not going to be moving forward as head coach of the Kings, and maybe this isn't the case, but at that point thinking that I'm probably not going to see Alvin for a very long time, which, yeah, I guess we'll see what's going on with Alvin Gentry. And I think always experiencing that the same way that we did with Tyrese. Like, you hear about it so often of guys are just gone one day, super unexpectedly, and Tyrese was definitely the first time I experienced that, but it happening again with Alvin, which was a little expected. And then some of these guys like Dante, Harrison we talked to recently, and I think we talked to Chimezi after the Phoenix game as well.
Damian Jones.
Yeah. A handful of those guys, like, you don't know if this is the last time you're going to talk to them. And I guess that's just been weird to me,
It's different. I have described it in the past as like, it's like you go away for the summer and you come back at the end of the year, and you come back, or you're going away from summer and you know that someone is moving that summer, and then when you show up to school the next year, they're just not there anymore. And if you haven't exchanged phone numbers or whatever, like, You just don't see him ever again. And we'll see these guys again because they will be back around with other teams. They're, regardless of who it is, I think most of the players we're talking about are going to be in the league. Alvin is a different situation. Alvin has a decision to make. He has an option to join the Kings' front office. I don't know if that's going to happen, but it's out there. And, even we talked to Monte McNair on Tuesday. He was asked very specifically about what role Alvin might have if he did accept a front office role. And Monte was kind of noncommittal. And to be honest with you, we've seen this act a couple of times in Sacramento. It's kind of what we saw with Tyrone Corbin, where he was supposed to be some advisor, and we never saw him. The fact is that Alvin Gentry's under contract next year, and the Kings, so they have offered him some sort of position that we don't even know what it is. And I would be surprised if he actually took it, to be honest with you, because Alvin Gentry still would like to coach. He still wants to be around players. He still wants to be around the action. And there's going to be opportunities for him, especially with the number of coaches that are, sort of out there that we're looking at that could find new jobs and stuff this summer. So, this could be the last we see of Alvin for a long time. But it's just a weird experience, right? It's one of those things where you're just watching things unfold, and even for yourself, it's like you're waiting and watching. Like social media, like a lot of people, the longer you do it, the more people you're calling and talking to and figuring out if it's happening, when it's happening, how it's going to happen. I pre-wrote it. I always have these things pre-written. I had Luke Walton's dismissal pre-written like in March of last year because I thought it was going to happen then. And then you just update stats and change things and like who's going to take over and all that stuff. So, but it's an experience, right?
It definitely is. How long are you on the phone for yesterday, James, when all this is going on?
Um,
Various phone calls, doing all your research.
I probably did. I was probably on the phone for like 9 hours yesterday.
Yeah.
Like I spoke to
Oof.
people until, I don't know, 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. I started getting texts around that time as well, from other people. Yeah, it's a weird situation because it wasn't just Alvin Gentry that was let go, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But it was kind of like a a Monday massacre in Sacramento, and these things happen. And we, as of this point, we do not know what's going to happen to Alvin Gentry's coaching staff. Monte McNair was asked specifically about that today, and Monte said, like, look, I already had that conversation with the guys. They're all just kind of in limbo, and we'll figure it out once a new coach comes in, and between the two of them, they'll help decide who's going to be back and who won't, and they'll move forward. I think that the two guys that I would circle and say there's a pretty solid shot they'll be back, but you never know, is Doug Christie and Rico Hines. But again, I've had those conversations as well with some of these guys, and there is no definitive answer to whether Doug or anyone else will be back on this roster, on this coaching staff next season. So yeah, it's just this weird finality that happens at the end of the season. We did get a lot of players. Brenden said, I think we had Damian Jones and Chimezie Metu on Saturday. We had Dante DiVincenzo, Davion Mitchell, Harrison Barnes. Is that it on
Yeah.
what's that?
And then
And
Alvin,
Alvin
but yeah.
on Sunday, following the season finale against the Phoenix Suns. Those were all on Zoom because they were on the road. Monday we reconvened at Golden One Center for an early morning press conference where we sat down with both with De'Aaron Fox and with Domantas Sabonis. I thought there's a lot to take away from that. And then, of course, on Tuesday, we were back at the arena at 11 o'clock this morning for another interview with Monte McNair, where he went over what really amounts to another complete failure of a season for the Sacramento Kings. His second very, lackluster season. I think he's got 61 wins as a general manager between his first 2 years, which is not good. and there's more changes coming. So we're gonna delve into like the coaching search and all that stuff, but let's start with De'Aaron and Domantas. I thought, Brenden, one of the things that stuck out to me was they had two different answers. Both of them answered the question as to whether they wanted to have input in the coaching search. We can start with Harrison Barnes. Why don't you tell us what happened with Harrison Barnes like the night before? Because that was kind of comical, right?
Yeah, Harrison definitely had a little bit more spice to him, I guess, on
He did, didn't
the
he?
last interview. Yeah, he was giving some media members a hard time. He had a little more spice to him is what we'll go with. And I asked him if the looming coaching decision for next season, whoever it may be, and off-season moves, would he like to be involved in that process? And he kind of laughed and said, thanks for thinking of him that way, but not happening pretty much. It was enough that I text you after, and I was like, was that a stupid question? He was like, no, Harrison's just a little spicy.
There are
right
no
now.
stupid questions. There are only stupid people that ask questions. Yeah, that's
Fair
no,
enough.
no. It wasn't a stupid question, and it wasn't stupid because I asked the next day, Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox, and I thought that their answers were totally like both of them answered the question, and Sabonis was like, hell yeah, I want input. Like, yeah, I want to tell them who I would like and what type of coach. And then Fox was different. Fox was his laid back. I'm a hooper,
Yeah,
right?
I have the quotes.
Yeah, let's hear him.
Sabonis is, yeah, I would like to be a part of it and talk to everyone, give them my input in what I think, what I've seen, what could work, what could help. So that's Sabonis, and then he went into a little bit of working together with that group in the offseason. And then when you ask De'Aaron, he says, quote, for me, I'm not thinking too much into the head coaching thing. Let the front office do what they do. I have trust in them. If they ask me, I'll give my 2 cents, but I'm not really going into it thinking like that. But just someone who's going to install discipline and try to change the culture. So
Discipline and someone who's going to try to change the culture, and I think that's huge. That's something that I think we've learned, and it's something like from my sources, from your sources, De'Aaron Fox wants more structure. He wants someone who will call a play on occasion, and who will direct traffic, and who will get in there with a whiteboard and start scribbling and start saying, do this, do this. Do this. He wants more. He wants more coaching, right? And I think that's something that we've learned about him over the last couple of years, but specifically in this season, he was perfectly fine with Luke Walton. Like he said it multiple times that he thought that Luke should have been the coach here, and then when they transitioned to Alvin, I think it was just he wants more structure, and so I don't know which coach that we'll discuss is going to be that guy.
well, you know who it reminds me of, and you can tell me if I'm off base on this.
Okay.
Dave Yeager.
Yeah. Actually, you know what? De'Aaron Fox really enjoyed his time under Dave Yeager. I think that that's something that like is missed. There were players that didn't like Dave, that they got upset with Dave. And even, Buddy Hield was one of those players, and Buddy would still admit that his best season in the NBA was under Dave Yeager. The Bagleys clearly did not like Dave Yeager. That's why Marvin Sr. called him Coach Yogurt all the time. And since you brought up Dave Yeager, there's actually a really cool piece in I think it's a Philadelphia Examiner today about Dave and his recovery from neck and, boy, what do they call it? Neck and throat cancer. And it's like he was on a feeding tube for a long time. He's still trying to gain weight. There was some time where he couldn't speak. He went through a lot of pain. So just something to look at. Dave, I spent a lot of time with Dave Yeager, and he's a good guy, and I'm glad to hear that he's doing so much better. But that is kind of the style of coach that I think Fox is used to. And it's interesting because like when you're coaching, like if you ever do pickup coaching, like when I coach soccer, there are some kids that respond really well to like directions. There are some kids that respond really well to freedom. There are some kids that are disrespectful and you have to keep in check. So like I think we're seeing that like everyone has a different point of view, right? But these guys here, when it comes to Fox and Sabonis, I'm surprised that we got two different answers. Because if I'm Fox, I would like to. He said I'd like to be kept in the loop, but like I don't have to know. I don't have to say, hey, I like that guy.
Which is very Fox. Like,
It is. It is.
it's very much him. I almost feel like I don't know, you just don't see De'Aaron as the guy. I was more surprised with Domas' answer, how blunt he was of saying, yes, I want to be involved. Because De'Aaron, it's pretty fitting for his personality. Like, I'm still like, if he wasn't talked to in this situation, I still think that, like, I still think he wants to be informed. Like, I do think it's probably more of a, like, whatever happens, if they ask my opinion, I'll give it. Like, I still think he probably wants to be in the loop. And that's just how De'Aaron goes about talking to media and just his personality in general, maybe a little bit more laid back. When we don't know Domas very well, I was pretty surprised with how blunt he was with that.
I really enjoy Domas as like an interviewee. Like he's engaging. He's fully in. Like he's smiling. He is happy still that he's in Sacramento, regardless of what happened here in the final 25 games of the season. Where I think what did he miss 10 down the stretch with a knee injury. And again, he's 100% fine. He told us it was just a bad bone bruise, and then he's totally fine. Fox says he could probably play now, but even like he said the Orlando game was the first time that he thought that he might have been able to play with his hand injury where the swelling had gone down enough in his right hand. But even then he said he would have been like a set shooter. He still couldn't dribble with his right hand. And I thought it was interesting too. He mentioned that Drew Holiday, that it was Giannis who hit his hand, and then that Drew Holiday like saw that he couldn't dribble with his right hand and kept pressuring him to like isolating him on his left, and that's one of the reasons why I think in that Bucks game he had 4 turnovers in the last 2.5 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, we got a little bit of injury updates, and like you said, Domas said a severe bone bruise.
Yep.
And then for De'Aaron, De'Aaron had a funny moment talking about Giannis for a second there. He said Giannis was going to the basket, and that's a strong bleep. We all know that. And I thought I hit his knee, but I actually got my hand on the ball, and the ball went straight through my hand and kind of just stretched out ligaments, and it was fat. I really couldn't see the bones and everything on my hand. It was a bad day. Feeling much better now, obviously, going through rehab and all that stuff, getting back on the court as soon as possible. So definitely updates from both those guys. Nothing all too concerning. Domas is going to play for Lithuania this offseason.
He is going to play for Lithuania. Yeah. He's super excited about that. And, there's a lot going on in Eastern Europe right now. And I think that, he does want to represent his country. And, who's the other big center that he plays with there?
It's Valanciunas, right?
Yeah, Jonas Valanciunas. Yeah. Man, that's a mean tandem.
Yeah,
like if you could play them together, that's a lot of gigantic Lithuanian.
No. We're not supposed to talk about Jonas Valanciunas.
Yeah, we don't talk about Jonas. Yeah, that's funny. Outside of that, was there any other crazy takeaway that you had from the Fox and Sabonis interviews?
I thought it was interesting that De'Aaron talked about. He said, I just have all these quotes here because I just wrote this yesterday about how winning teams are built the same. It's, quote, most winning teams are kind of built the same. You got your 2, 3, maybe 4 guys, and everything else is just kind of length and shooting. So being built like that, I mean, I think we have a pretty good foundation where we're at, but obviously you can never have too much length and too much shooting in the NBA. That's a premium. We heard Monte, McNair today confirm kind of the obvious of, we do really need shooting this offseason. And I think it makes sense. It's nothing like eye-opening, but it's interesting to hear them say it themselves.
Yeah, I also think Monte McNair has continued to say that they're going to be aggressive, that they're not looking for a 1 year playoff fix. Sorry, Kenny Caraway. They're not looking for a 1 year deal where they get into the playoffs, and then after that happens, they could crash and burn right afterwards. They're looking for sustainable success, and I'm like it's a good thing that Monte McNair was there on Tuesday, sitting in front of cameras and having a conversation for talking about how he's going to hire a new coach. And to me, that's a good thing because that means Monte's going to hire his own coach. And that's something that he has not had the opportunity to do yet. Again, Luke Walton was not his hire. That was Vlade Divac's hire. I think that like when you make a big swing like the Sabonis deal, you probably should have the opportunity to continue to build it out because you made the big building block piece, and now it's like, okay, can you put the rest of it together? I'm hoping he gets that opportunity.
Can we go to the Luke thing real quick?
Yeah.
Backtrack a sec to that, because I think a lot of people would say that, and I'm curious your response to this, of that Monty didn't choose Luke in the first place, but he did kind of choose him to be his guy when he had Luke for a second year in a row.
Okay, so I'm gonna say that is probably up for debate. So I would like to tell you that is 100% true. That Monte McNair had an unequivocal, I want Luke Walton back. I do know that they had a very good working relationship. That everything went like they were in lockstep with a lot of stuff down the stretch of last season. But I'll also tell you that like Luke Walton had $11 million coming into this season left on his contract for the next 2 years, and it's something like I want to say it was like 6.5 million he's owed next season. So he was owed a lot of money, and I know it's Sacramento Kings basketball in a nutshell, but when you start a coach at the beginning of the season and he coaches, what did he finish up like 17 games, right? Yeah, if you coach 17 games and then an interim steps in, that interim is never going to get paid head coaching salary. He'll get paid close. He might make 2 million a year or 2.5 million a year, but he's not getting like 4 or 5. That's just typically not the way it goes. And so I would say that I would like to believe that Monty said, yes, Luke is my guy. But if that's what he felt, then he probably should have given him more than 17 games. And Alvin Gentry was always hired for a specific reason, and that was if the Luke Walton situation did not work, that they had a replacement in mind. They had a replacement sitting there ready to step in. And so, yes and no, I'm going to say that was probably not 100% pure Monty McNair says, Luke is my guy and I'm going to roll with him. And we're never going to get the fully straight answer. Even if they give you a straight answer, I don't think it's a straight answer. And so we're going to have to, we can take his word at it. But at the same time, like you let the dude go 17 games into the season. Like if he was really your guy, you probably would have let him ride it out a little bit longer. And I know that Walton really thought it was a knee-jerk reaction and that there should have been more time. That every time something goes wrong with this franchise, it's always knee-jerk. It's like, we got to fire him. We got to fire him now. And Walton truly believed that if they would have just let him ride this thing out, that he probably would have steadied the ship and shown some continuity and consistency going forward. But at the same time, they were getting drubbed, and changes happen, right? So
They definitely do. They definitely do. Yeah. It makes sense. Yeah. So do you think that this is also part of like Ken Cantanella, for example, assistant GM for the Kings, has moved on from everything I've heard is that he's pretty highly regarded, a good CBA cap numbers guy. To you, is that another example of Monte getting to build his staff?
I would like to tell you yes, but I think I'm going to go sort of in the same sort of vein that we just did with Luke Walton. Like, look, I when Monty took this job, it was under like extreme circumstances. Like, I think I've laid it out. Like, for me, like this job, it has to be looked at as like one of like it's a mind-boggling job to take the Sacramento Kings like general manager job. If you're Monte McNair, when he takes a job, I'm just going to run through this super quick. You already have Buddy Hield under contract for 24, 22, 20 million. So 3 more years of Buddy Hield and a really like a tough contract to move. Your first act of business is that you have to sign De'Aaron Fox to a new 5-year, $163 million extension. Also, if you're Monte McNair, you are accepting the fact that Luke Walton will be your head coach for at least 1 year and maybe part of another. Maybe. So, yes, a part of another. Not only that, but you have Ken Catanella, who is your assistant GM. You beat Wes Wilcox out for the job, but then Wes Wilcox is hired as your number 2. So now you have 2 guys that you've never worked with before as your number 2, 3 as your assistant GMs. On top of that, Joe Dumars is floating out there, who is a former executive extraordinaire. That's a I don't even like
Do we know a title, James?
he has a title. I can't remember what it is, but it's basically it's an advisor to the chairman, I believe, is his title. And the chairman is Vivek Ranadive. Vivek is his own situation because everyone knows that like this is 9 years of Vivek being part of this group. So if you're Monte McNair, you took on a job with some blemishes, with some like weird situations, and now you're 2 years in, and it was a pretty stunning day. Like Monday was Monday evening was when news broke that it wasn't just Ken Catanella lost his job, but also Alex Sigwa, the one of the Kings media relations directors, and Joe Resendez, the Kings trainer. All of them lost their job on Monday evening, and like these situations, like again, you're going through this for the first time. You didn't even know, like you had asked Alex about his job before, and like it's strange, right?
Yeah, I asked Alex again, media relations director, ex-media relations director, I guess, earlier this season of like, so how does your guys' position work? Is it season by season? And I even got met with a little bit of like what are you talking about? And I had to like double down on this. Like, no, it's just like any other job. It's not contracted like NBA players and management and things like that. And he's gone, James. We saw him yesterday, and I just don't get to see him.
No,
It's a weird one.
It's rough. Okay, so that's gonna be like there's a personal side to this that, I even talked about Alex and Rasan. So the Kings had 2 media directors, Alex and then Rasan Gathers. Both of them are great dudes. I've known Alex for 12 years. Alex used to be in the PR department of the Kings. He started out as a PR director, and I mean as a PR intern, and then he worked his way up in PR. And then he left the Kings for a few years after the Maloof era, and just like the final nights of the Maloofs were like some of the worst things. That like they had a like the sister, I can't even remember her name at this point. Joe and Gavin and like their sister brought one of her friends up and a camera crew from the Real Housewives of whatever Southern California. They're like I can't even remember where they were, the Real Housewives of, and
Beverly
they
Hills or
acted.
something.
Well, I don't think it's Beverly Hills. I think it's actually it's not Anaheim. I can't remember. Anyway,
Important
they
details, James.
yeah they brought a camera crew up and filmed like them walking through the halls of like the main corridors of Golden One of Arco Arena, acting like they were fearful for their lives. Like that's what they were doing. They're like, "Oh my gosh, we're worried. We got to get to our box super fast. We don't want to get assaulted by the fan base." And like it was like this weird thing. Orange County, Real Housewives of Orange County. There it is.
Boom, it clicked.
Yeah, it did. I mean, it may even like I remember Colleen is the mother of the Maloofs, but I for some reason I can't remember the wife's name. I mean the sister's name. Anyway, like Alex and his boss were part of this where they literally had to go like babysit this camera crew and their people, and it was just like the most shameful, embarrassing thing that anyone had ever seen. And they were like, and most of the people left that had to be part of like the final days of the Maloofs, because it was like, okay, this is too much. And Vivek wanted to hire a bunch of new people when they actually did their whole switch over and all that stuff. So anyway, Alex is a good guy. He's been around for a long time, and like these guys, they work hard. I know he was on the road trip. He got back at 1 o'clock in the morning from Phoenix on Monday morning. He was one of the first guys in the building. Helped write press releases for the things that were going to happen during the day. Helped talk to people about, like prep people for what was going to be coming their way. All of this stuff, and then gets called into an office later in the day and gets let go. And it really is unfair, but it's NBA business. I've seen at this point, like a lot of media directors, a lot of media like staff have come and gone in Sacramento. And when I first started, it was Darren May and Chris Clark and Devin Blankenship and Daryl Orada. All of those guys are gone. Troy Hansen was, the head of that group. And then we had Chris Clark for a long time, who, brought in Rasan, and there's been some other guys that have come and gone, but that hurts because Brenden and I spend a lot of time waiting in these rooms, like for our media, for players to show up, right? Or to get let in after practice. And it's guys like Alex that are there most of the time, like hanging out with you. They're the guys you go to when you want a one-on-one with a player. They're the guys you go to when you want a media credential, if you're Brenden, and all of these things. And so when you lose guys like this, it's hard because they do become friends. And so that one's hard. Ken Catanella is a really good guy. I've known Ken for a long time. Ken is, he's always like, he cracks me up because he's so straight-laced that he really wouldn't even answer. Like, I would send him a text about a specific nuance to the salary cap, right? Like, look, I'm trying to break this down, and I'm not asking for specifics about a player or what you're going to offer or anything like that. But hey, I just want to know about this point in the CBA. I'm having some sort of issue breaking it down, and Ken would go, well, okay, I'll check with PR and make sure that I can get you that information. And then would get back to me, okay, I got clearance to get you that information. And yes, you can, he would explain it. And just like always, there was like, if there was ever a leak in Sacramento, it was never Ken Catanella, like ever. Like he was never going to give you anything, but a really, really good guy and a family guy who lives in Rockland. He's been with the franchise for 6 years and now he's starting over. I don't know Joe, the head trainer, that well. I do know that there's some internal strife there with that side, the medical group, and I'll have to get more into it, as we go along. But he always seemed like a really good guy, and I'll point out too, like, how many injuries do the Kings have this year? Like,
There were some that were kind of freak injuries, like Rashawn's eye situation twice. There was a lot of COVID-related inavailability health and safety protocol that made it feel like a lot more injuries than it was. But like, kind of, I think I have a question for you that I think is kind of the road you're going down here. Is that like people look at, the athletic trainer being let go and media relations director being let go and being like they handled injuries so bad. That must be what they're feeling by doing this. And like you're saying, there's not that many injuries that went on right now, but I think the ones that people would point to are looking back to maybe the way that Marvin was handled, or situations of like, we don't know until very late in this season of are Fox and Sabonis going to return or not. They don't officially rule them out. Yeah, I think it's interesting to see a lot of people jumping to that.
Okay, so I'll say this. Harrison Barnes hurt his foot like in the first 2 weeks of the season, right? Came back like 2 or 3 days later. We had a couple of games missed when Rashawn got poked in the eye in the first time, and then the second time was an eye laceration and actually needed a procedure. Terrence Davis fell and broke his wrist. Outside of that, I remember Justin Holiday missing a game because of illness. I remember some, like, they
Back
wrote him.
stuff with Len.
Yeah, but even most of those situations were just that they weren't going to play. Like, I don't think we really had, outside of Terrence Davis and the Rashawn Holmes, until we got late in the season. And honestly, Fox and Sabonis, if it were a different situation and this team was fighting for a playoff spot, they probably would have been able to play after 2 or 3 games. I think last year we can look at the same exact thing. This team was healthy almost the whole year. The year before that, we had the De'Aaron Fox and, Marvin Bagley broke his wrist in the first game of the season. He got karate chopped by Kelly Oubre. And then, like, right before game 10 in a practice, De'Aaron Fox got the grade 3 ankle sprain, right? Outside of that, again, like, this team has been relatively healthy. And you're always going to get your end of the season thing where they shut guys down. We had last year at the end of the year, Tyrese Halliburton had that one bad step where he like tacoed his knee and everyone was freaking out, and then he was fine. And again, Fox ended the season with COVID stuff. But like, this team really has been relatively healthy. And so, like, I'm not going to point a bunch of fingers at a training staff that, like, is Pete Youngman, like, did he need to be replaced? Absolutely not. That was a travesty that happened, and his entire staff was so incredible. And, like we talked about, Ramsey just won the national championship at Kansas as their their strength and conditioning coach. Manny Romero is down at UOP. Pete is with the G League Ignite. Like, these guys are so highly respected, all of them. Well, Manny and oh my goodness, why am I drawing a blank now? They continued their education, and they have like PhDs in what they do, like, because that's what Pete Youngman like fostered behind the scenes. Now this new group, like, we've seen a lot of strength and conditioning coaches come and go, which is weird. But Ramsey went and continued his education and all that stuff. But we've seen a lot of like turnover somewhat in that department. But Joe has been there, and everything I've heard about Joe, he's a very nice guy. And again, like, I think the Kings made cuts. Like, at the end of the day, I don't think anyone did like a horrible job. I don't think they're being blamed for anything. I think at the end, we're probably just seeing, number one, some change that Monte wanted to make for himself. But also, we're probably seeing some cost-cutting measures here.
Yeah. Is this a typical amount of turnover? I mean, and who knows if we're done, right?
In a regular franchise?
I guess we'll go for the Kings.
No. No, I don't think it's like, yes, I think this is typical for the Kings. Now, is it this many? Maybe not, but really, it is. It's almost every. I mean, we have a new coach every 2 years in Sacramento. And that means all the assistants go most of the time, or a couple stay. But when it comes to like some of these departments, I mean, Pete Youngman was there for 25 years or something. Most of his staff was there for 10, 12 years. Like, they were around for a long time. Chris Clark, 17 years with Sacramento Kings before he was let go a couple of years ago. So like these are, situations that happen, but at the same time, the Kings are always in flux, and they've got some new stuff happening. They've got some new people they're bringing in for the PR side, and someone is shifting over into the basketball side, and we'll see how that happens, see how it works. And I hope they're able to build up their staff. Their media relations staff has been totally understaffed for years. Like the Warriors have 6 guys, the Kings typically have 2 and an intern, and so that can't keep going. I mean, you're just running people into the ground. But it's part of Kings basketball, and it's kind of part of Kings lore. It's what happens at the end of every season.
Yeah. All those books behind you are actually just books of Kings lore throughout the years.
Yeah, I could write a few
5 books
of them
per year.
Yeah, I could write a few books about what's happened.
So staying on management real quick, if that's all right.
Yeah, let's do it.
I wanted to have a little conversation about Wes Wilcox. I think I just hear his name a lot, being around more than I think being around, I think I've come to realize that maybe Wes Wilcox is more involved than I initially thought. And my question to you is that, everybody always is just kind of pointing towards Monte. And I'm not saying Wes being involved is a bad thing or anything like that, but I think what's interesting to me is, and this is mainly throughout socials, I see whenever you're talking about the front office, you say Monte and Wes. But I think just for the sake of this, to me, is that so much of the fan base is often Monte this, Monte that. And do you think that is typical for just who the head honcho is going to be the name that's constantly thrown out there? Or do you think it should be Monte and Wes more often compared to just Monte's doing this, Monte's doing that?
Yeah, I mean, we always had Vlade as well, and Vlade and Peja were there together the whole time, and Ken Cattanella is there as well. So with this specific front office, Monte's a bit of an introvert, and he's not super comfortable in front of a camera. That's we've noticed that the whole time. I thought last year at this time he had a press conference that was his best press conference, that he really opened up and he took accountability. I don't think we saw that as much this time around, but I think we're also kind of off kilter because there's so many things happening at one time this season specifically. So when I look at Monte, Monte is, again, he's more of an introvert. He's a really bright guy. I've had plenty of. He prefers his conversations off the record, just him and you, and away in a conference room with the door closed. That's how he prefers his conversations. Wes Wilcox is totally different. Wes wanders around the court in pregame, and he's accessible, right? And you've seen me go over and have conversations with Wes.
Every single pregame, Wes is out there.
Every single pregame, yeah. And so a lot of times, Wes is an extrovert. He is someone who is a phone call guy. He's a guy that knows everyone in the league. He's a guy who's been around for a long time, who's been a general manager before. So I think what you're looking at is a dynamic of 2 totally different personalities. And I think that there's a way that those 2 personalities can really work together. There's also always going to be this situation of whether one guy is doing, if they're on the same page, right? So, and I think they are on the same page for the most part. But I also know that you have to be able to read between the lines so hard to get anything out of Monte McNair. And that's not the case with Wes. Wes is much more of an open book. So yeah, I think especially now that Ken is gone, we are moving forward with Monte and Wes, but every time there is an actual press conference and there's actually something to discuss, like a coach just got fired and you just posted a 30-52 trash season in your 16 consecutive non-playoff season, then Monte is the one who's up there by himself. And that, to me, it's different. It is way different because, it used to be that, you walk in and there's Pete D'Alessandro, Chris Mullen. There would be name tags, so we would like the little L-shaped things, brackets that sit up with people's names on them. We'd walk in, there'd be 3 microphones, there'd be 3 chairs, there'd be a Vivek Ranadive one, a Pete D'Alessandro, a Chris Mullen, or there would be a Vlade Divac, Dave Yeager, and Vivek Ranadive. There's all of these different people that are going to talk, and that's just not the case anymore. It's really Monte sitting there like taking all of the questions, hard questions, soft questions, confusing questions, whatever they might be. Um, Monte is the one who is answering all of them in front of cameras, but that's not the way it works when you're around the building, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, definitely. And of course, nobody is. I don't think anybody's assuming that Monte's making all these decisions by himself or anything. I just think it's easy to forget and kind of get caught up and just throw it all on one name when there's a team that goes into all of this. And we're seeing that team get altered a little bit, and their beliefs extend beyond their immediate group in management into the coaching staff that's going to get reworked here as well, and even things like the training staff, media relations, and all that. And it's definitely interesting to witness all this turnover and kind of see what it leads to going into next year, because as we've said over and over, it's a very big year that you're not really allowed to mess up. De'Aaron did have a moment of kind of saying, like, winning's important every year, but it was kind of like we have to win next year.
He had a moment where he said, I want to be a winner.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I thought it was a really good moment for him. I should have probably had that clip ready. But yeah, like he did get like there. We saw it once earlier in the season where he got a little emotional about that and saying the same thing. And I thought so too in this one. And he said, look, I haven't wavered from wanting to be in SAC. I want to be here, and I want to be the one that breaks through, because that will mean more here than it will anywhere else. If you can be the guy who snaps a 16-year streak, you're the dude. So
Absolutely. And, De'Aaron said that before in his career. I think people will point to maybe his little bit of pettiness earlier in the season of like, I wouldn't know, we're never in the play, or this isn't the playoffs, whatever it was. He was frustrated. It was a bad part of the year, and I think it was a little bit of a petty comment from De'Aaron, but I think that anybody would be driven to feeling emotional and just from losing so many years in your career when that's something that he's not ever been used to. So we've heard De'Aaron earlier in his career and kind of doubled down on it again that yes, he very much wants to be in Sacramento, which not all too surprising. Good to hear him say it in my mind.
I think it's something we heard from Donte DiVincenzo as well. Like Donte DiVincenzo said it the other night. He's like, we have a bunch of guys who want to win. Like, and they're hard workers. Like, but he also said, like, these dudes want to win card games, like on the plane. Like, we got a bunch of guys who, and that's something like, I once had a friend of ours. We were doing like a family board game night with another couple and with some friends, and the wife asked me like, why do you always try to win? And I just looked at her. I'm like, I've never played anything not to win. Like, I don't know what you mean. Like, I played sports for years. Like, everything I've ever played, I always wanted to win. Like, there is no quit. There is no, like, so I get that mentality that, like,
absolutely. I get asked, then why are we playing? Like, what are we playing for?
Yeah, what is the point? Like, there is, we're not just, like, meandering here and, like, hanging. I mean, we are just hanging out. But I can multitask.
Maybe they are. I'm not. I have a goal.
Yeah, I can whoop your ass while talking to you. It's fine. Like, I have no problems with that.
You and I walked past cornhole one time going into Golden One Center. We said we were going to throw it one time. I think we ended up each doing 5 until one of us got it in.
Yeah.
I'm going to claim that I won that, by the way.
I don't know. Is that what happened?
That's how I remember it.
I don't think that's what happened.
No.
So I'll just say, like, look, that it's a funny thing, but I think that there is something to that, especially with this team. I think Davion is a guy who's so intense. Donte DiVincenzo is so intense. And like we were gonna cover that. Did we cover the Dante DiVincenzo situation? So yes, we kind of on the last pod, we spent like 40 minutes on Dante DiVincenzo, right? And like we covered every angle that you could possibly cover on Dante DiVincenzo. And in that conversation, I discussed the fact that his people are angry and not happy at all with the Kings. That is the case. Don't let anyone tell you differently. And I think that that can be smoothed over and figured out, but I didn't expect, like, usually when you write something like that, it can go viral. But typically when you podcast something like that, I was surprised. And, like, I had no problems with someone cutting video of me saying what I said because I stand behind everything I said. I always have. But yeah, that was crazy to watch the Dante DiVincenzo situation kind of spill out and go crazy and go nuts. I mean, it like there was one tweet that was like someone tweeted a video where they clipped two different things that I said and put them together. Again, I had no problems with even the way it was edited and put together. And then that like went viral on Saturday where like one of the NBA Central account picked it up or something and it had like 10,000 likes or something. It did go viral. So like there is going to be a situation there, but there's going to be all kinds of situations here in SAC. There are going to be people who walk away and who aren't happy. There can be guys like Damian Jones, who everyone likes a lot, who might not even get offered a contract and might just go somewhere else and play somewhere else. You just don't know, and that's kind of the way that these things work out. The fact that someone is unhappy, it's newsworthy and it's worth me spending time on for sure. But at the same time, there's we now have 4 months for them to work it out, 5 months for them to work it out. Like this thing won't reconvene until September, and they have plenty of time to figure out and get on the same page and work together. That's something I thought was interesting with Sabonis. The part where we talked about like he wants to play together so much during the summer and start building chemistry. Did you find anything interesting out of that?
That they were, it wasn't like hopefully we can get together. It's we are getting together. Domas said that he'll go and do individual workouts with guys. You mentioned a 2-man game. I'm assuming that's talking about De'Aaron. And he said, hopefully everyone on the team. And I'm like, Domas, who is on this team? But yeah, I think that it was very certain of we are going to build chemistry. And they had slightly different answers with that. They both said that they were going to be working out together, but I thought that De'Aaron's was more focused on communication. Not that they won't get in the gym or anything like that, but De'Aaron was very much about like, I think one of the best ways to build chemistry is be constantly communicating with someone. And I think that they're going to get an opportunity to do that throughout this offseason, and get to go into a training camp with a coach and kind of be on the same page is the idea for most of this season. I mean, we know even going into last year, obviously the Luke situation changed really quick, which, by the way, De'Aaron pointed out that's the first time he's had a coaching change in the middle of the season, which was something I hadn't clicked for me until he said that. But, Buddy and Marvin made it pretty clear they didn't want to be here. And that's what you're dealing with at the beginning of this season. So if you can go into the next year with a new coaching staff and all being on the same page, having chemistry built from the previous offseason where Fox, Domas, Davion, Say, Harrison, and Dante are part of that as well, then you have that core and that chemistry built between those guys that can start from when they were all traded here earlier this season. And if they get to build that over the offseason, I think that De'Aaron has a guy that he can look at and is like, this is the duo, me and Domantas Sabonis, and that's a chemistry that he knows he can focus on building and is probably not going to change.
I think it was interesting. I was told by someone in the Kings front office that when they made this Sabonis trade, that they thought they got two All-Stars. And the first was Domantas, and the second was De'Aaron Fox. They thought that Domas would instantly make De'Aaron an All-Star. And that's exactly what we saw. Like, Fox, before he got hurt, was averaging 28-something a game. I mean, he was absolutely
Final
incredible.
15 28.9, 6.8 assists, 50.3% from the field, and 36% from three. Also,
All-star.
De'Aaron very much acknowledged that he wasn't happy with how he performed this year.
Yeah. Oh no, he's been honest the whole time. He said like, "Hey, I didn't shoot well." I keep getting this like image in my head of like De'Aaron just like hanging out in Houston, and all of a sudden there's like a knock at the door, and he opens the door, and it's like Domas like, "I'm here to work on the two-man game." Like, okay, were you gonna call first? Like, nope, I'm here. Let's go, two-man game. Like, like I love it. I think like Sabonis saying that he's just gonna like travel to go see all of his dudes. Like, and I think the reality is that Domas will realize very quickly that he has, he's going to play for Lithuania. He has a brand new baby. He needs to move in to whatever house he's going to live in. Like, there ain't going to be no time for all of these trips all over the place for him and to like to fly wherever Trey Lyles is and like, hey, two-man game, let's go right now. Like, you're like, oh, okay. I think the biggest thing is that a lot of players do work out in LA. Sabonis lives in LA. A lot of players work out in Las Vegas. That's like a 20-minute flight to go from LA to Vegas. 30-minute flight, whatever it is. I mean, you could be there, like, you can drive with no problems. I think that there's a way that this team, a lot of these players can get together and spend a lot of time together, like working out, building some chemistry. Let's get to we don't have Tuesday overreactions today. There's too much information. Like I think the Tuesday overreactions, just so you know, the Tuesday overreactions. The Kings fired everybody. They did the overreacting. Like they fired a bunch of people, and they always fire a bunch of people. But like this one kind of hurt. It did. Like the guys that they fired. Like Alex is a really good guy. He's a friend. That one hurt. Like getting a phone call from him yesterday. That one hurt. Kane Cantnell is a good guy. Alvin Gentry, absolutely gem of a guy. Like I mean, if
He thanked the media. He was like, "I bet you guys don't hear that one very often."
And what did he say? Like, you remember? Did you write down anything that he said? Did you
I don't
quote
have
him?
Alvin's written down, but Alvin was just saying that he loves doing this, that he loves being a coach and being around the players, that, believe it or not, I love being around the media. And that's where he dropped the whole, I'm sure you guys don't hear that all too often. And you saw him messing around like pre and post game. Like you can tell Alvin just loves doing this. I mean, it's 34 years. He has to.
Yeah, and I also he said, you guys have been extremely fair through a very hard season. You have said harsh things that needed to be said. But he's like, I'm cool. We're like, you've been a good group of media with me and very fair with me and balanced, and that's at the end of the day what we try to do. We try to be balanced. We try to be fair. I know a lot of people don't like it when I do it, but I always try to give perspective. Like, I would love to tell you that Luke Walton was just a complete failure last year as a coach, but he had no players. And this season, like, in all honesty, I think the Sacramento Kings threw away a season trying to get Domantas Sabonis or Ben Simmons or name that big name player that would come available. They threw away the whole front half of the season with one focus in mind, and that was to find an all-star. And once we get that all-star, maybe this summer we can get another all-star and we can start building something. But that doesn't change the fact that I believe they threw away half of a season and it ended up being a whole season. And you got to, like, the ramifications of that are going to be, like, it's loud, it's noisy, it's 30 wins. And that's not good. And people lost their jobs. And so at the end of the day, like, it's the end of the season. This is what happens, but it doesn't, I would love it if it didn't happen. I would love it if we actually saw something getting built, and that would be really cool. So
Hopefully.
hopefully.
Hopefully that's where we're going. Was it notable because Monte got asked specifically about Trey Lyles at one point today, and he said pleasantly surprised. Am I overreacting? Tuesday overreacting even to being like 2.6 million? Let's do this.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, me too.
Like, I like Trey Lyles. If Trey Lyles is if Trey Lyles is a ninth person on your in your rotation, and even Justin Holiday is a 10th guy in your rotation, I think you could have a pretty solid squad. I mean, you got to have much better number 3, number 5, number 6, number 7. You got to figure out where those other positions are and how they you know they impact the rest of the group. But I still 2.6 million. Sign me up.
Yeah.
Like, and if you need to, you can trade Trey Lyles at 2.6 million. I mean, that's an easy one. Like if it doesn't work out or you need to make some other adjustment, but you also have to remember this is one thing I'll like the nuances of the salary cap. If you have Trey Lyles on as one of your 13, you have to have 13 rostered players, right? And then your salary cap is based off of if you have less than 13, then you have to have a cap hold for 950,000, which is a league minimum player next season. So basically what I'm saying is Trey Lyles only costs you $1.6 million more than a league minimum player. And man, he played way better than that. Way, way better than that. So yes, I would have Trey Lyles back on this team, and I don't know why he makes so little. I was surprised by how little he made.
Yeah, I am all for Trey Lyles. I think it would be smart for the Kings to do that. He's certainly not a long-term answer as a starter or anything like that. I think he's a good backup is kind of how I would view Trey Lyles.
Yeah.
Where do you want to go next year? I have a business of basketball to close us, but
You have a
if you wanna go
business of
there, yeah.
basketball. What
I
is
do.
Brenden is he's got a business of basketball? What in the hell is going on here? Okay, so I want to cover we're going to cover two things on the way out the door before we get to the business of basketball.
Why'd you say it like that?
Well, because usually I come up with the business of basketball, so I'm excited to hear your business of basketball. The business of basketball.
There we go.
Yeah, and I'm gonna segue to something sad before we get to the second conversation. Yesterday morning, Wayne Cooper passed away at the age of 65. And for those of you who don't know who Wayne Cooper was, he was Jeff Petrie's right-hand man in Sacramento. He's a 14-year veteran of the NBA. He's a big, tall, 6'10", big man that played for a long time in the league and then spent 19 years in Sacramento in the front office. And I think even the last handful of years, he was actually the general manager of the Sacramento Kings. He was an assistant GM for a long time, but I believe he was the GM, and Jeff had moved up to the president of basketball operations, maybe for the last 5 years, maybe a little bit longer than that. And I'll tell you, in 2013, when Vivek decided to bring in Pete D'Alessandro and Chris Mullin, and the transition of power was happening, where Petrie and Mike Petrie, his son, and Sharif Abdul-Rahim was there, and Wayne Cooper. You were really replacing a legendary group that had put together an incredible run in Sacramento. In the 37 years the Kings have been in Sacramento, they've made the playoffs 10 times. 8 of those came during one stretch, and one of the other years came in one of Jeff Petrie's first year as a general manager of the Kings. So 9 of the 10 total years of playoffs in the Kings Sacramento era of Kings basketball was Jeff Petrie with Wayne Cooper at his side. And we got to the point in 2013 where we were just a couple of weeks away from the draft, and the decision was made to fully transition away from Petrie and his group and to relieve them of their duties. And that was shocking because Jeff Petrie was Kings basketball. I mean, Jeff Petrie literally for 19, 20 years was Kings basketball. He is the architect of everything that was good in Sacramento. Rick Adelman was his good friend. still is his good friend. But again, Wayne is one of those guys that kind of flew under the radar and was such a huge part of all of that. And I'll tell you, the day that Wayne and Jeff were let go was a brutal day for someone who covered the team, because they were like, when you grow up watching these guys, when you're around them and you're seeing all of the positivity, and even when they made mistakes in the last couple of years, it was out of desperation because the Maloofs had no money and they were cash strapped, and they made decisions that they would not have normally made with draft picks and stuff like that. But it was out of desperation because the owners had no money to. They didn't have an idea that, again, they drafted Thomas Robinson over Damian Lillard, and from what I know, the reason they did that was because the Maloofs wouldn't commit to giving them enough money for free agency to go to re-sign Jason Thompson. So they knew they needed a power forward. They knew that they already had Isaiah Thomas and Jimmer Fredette and Tyreek Evans as their point guards, their guys who could play point guard, but they made mistakes there that were because of a lack of money. So that final day, I was on my way home, and of course I live way up the hill away from the arena, and I stopped in at Paul Martin's in Roseville, which used to be like one of my watering holes when I lived in that area, and I sat down at the bar and I needed a drink. It had been a bad day. The whole day felt bad, and I look behind me, and Wayne Cooper walked in, and then Jeff Petrie walked in, and they sat down. They had a glass of wine, and they were sitting behind me. I was sitting with my back to them at the bar, and then I went to the bartender and I said, "Hey, can I get them another round?" And the bartender said, "Are you sure?" And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, I'll get another round." They're like, "Well, Jeff just gets like he gets like a happy hour Pinot, but Wayne doesn't." I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, "Go ahead and get him a glass of wine." So anyway, it ended up costing me, I think, like Wayne's was like a $30 glass of wine. He loved Rombauer Chardonnay, and he's again a huge man. Like, and I walked over and I said, goodbye, basically, because it's like what we're dealing with today. I don't think I ever saw Wayne Cooper ever again after that day. I went over and I said, "Hey, thank you guys for all that you've done for these years, and good luck with whatever's next." And they said thank you and thanks for the glass of wine, and we cheers, and I walked away. So like R.I.P. to Wayne Cooper. I know there are a lot of Kings people, guys like Gary Gerald and Chris Clark, and you know Jerry Reynolds and Jeff Petrie and Mike Petrie, and all of these guys who spent years with Wayne Cooper, who are hurting over the last 24 hours, because he was a good man and gone way too soon at age 65. And then to not to be a downer, I mean, that's these things happen. We live in a time where these things are happening more often than we would like. But Brenden, that will I'll move on to the coaching search. And so before we get out of here, we're already seeing a group of names, and I think right now I would like to, what names of the group that we've heard so far, and I'll just rattle them off. We've heard the Kings attached to Steve Clifford, Terry Stotts, Mike D'Antoni, Kenny Atkinson, Mike Brown, Mark Jackson, Darvin Ham, Charles Lee. There's other names that could become available. Is there anyone that just stands out to you that, like, man, I would love to cover that guy?
Man, I would love to cover that guy. I'm not sure. I more so had a name that stood out that I would like to I maybe wouldn't love to cover.
Oh, who's that?
Probably Mark Jackson.
I'm with you.
There was a lot of Mark Jackson stories. If anybody wants to look up Mark Jackson stories, and it's interesting that decent amount happened in Golden State, while Vivek's in Golden State. Mark Jackson was the name that popped off that list to me because he was the one I'm like, oh, I don't know about this one.
I'm with you.
I'm interested.
You're interested. You're wide open. Yeah, I mean, all of these get. There's some very successful coaches. There's some coaches that maybe didn't have as much success as you thought they might have or could have in their first time around. Steve Clifford being one of those guys that he's done a good job after. Where was he? Was he at Charlotte first?
Orlando.
Orlando. Um, yeah, like there's some interesting names that are being thrown out there, but they all kind of have a theme. It's that they have experience, except for Darvin Ham and Charles Lee, who are both on Mike Budenholzer's staff in Milwaukee. And then I'll also say Frank Vogel is probably going to get mentioned at some point, who just left the Lakers, and I know a lot of Kings fans are going to have like the knee jerk reaction, like no, no, he's a
No
former
more Laker
Laker.
leftovers.
Yeah. And then the other one is Quinn Snyder, who, I think Quinn Snyder is going to be chased by huge jobs if he does become available, if he does leave Utah. And I know that we're already hearing that he probably wouldn't consider the Lakers job after their handling of the Frank Vogel situation, which was flat out crazy. Oh my goodness, that was wild. Like having a coach get fired on Twitter by Woj, like in the final seconds of a game, and then
It,
having to.
and then for Woj to be like, he'll find out on Monday when he tweeted it on Saturday. I'm like, no, Woj, that's not how this
That was on
works.
Sunday, wasn't it? Yeah.
Maybe it was Sunday, but Woj was like,
Yeah.
oh, he'll find out soon. Like, like when he picks up his phone, or what is
Yeah, when he has 700 voice messages in his inbox, yeah, and like
when he connects to Wi-Fi? Like, I don't know what
text thread, like, boy, I got some text during the end of that game. I wonder what happened. Yeah. So again, like I think people should keep an open mind. Go back to Frank Vogel's time in Indiana when he was extremely successful. Go back to 2 years ago when he won an NBA championship. And Kings fans, like at this point, like you are beggars and you should not be choosers. Like, um, he is a guy who's won, and so are a lot of these guys. I think of the group, Kenny Atkinson is one of the guys that gets the most love within the within the group around us, right? Within the group of Kings fans, everyone loves Kenny Atkinson. He wasn't that successful. Like, did he have a year where he was solid? Yeah, but he also he had some really bad years with some really bad teams. But I think that there are coaches with more success in winning.
The
Mike
Milwaukee
D'Antoni.
guys are interesting too.
Yeah,
I know they don't
yeah.
have the experience, but like Charles Lee is 37 and been with Budenholzer when he was in Atlanta and then came with in Milwaukee. And like Taylor Jenkins comes from the Budenholzer coaching tree. There's I think both of those guys are interesting. Darvin Ham, which I'm a little worried that you and Sean would be favored in the media room. I don't know how
Well,
I
I
feel
should be
about
favored
this.
for
There'd
sure.
Be way
For
too
sure,
much
I should be
ham.
favored.
There'd be way too much ham going on for me.
Hell
I'm more of
yeah.
a turkey guy.
I loved
Yeah, I
watching
don't know.
Darvin Ham. That dude played hard and he dunked like he could get up. He played extreme, like sort of KJ Martin, maybe a little bit better than KJ Martin. Like
I
he
just
was.
got educated on his broken backboard dunk. Just watched that the other day.
Oh yeah, Darvin Ham's. Yeah, oh yeah. I mean 40, 44, 46 inch vertical leap, like tremendous leaper. Yeah, and he's been around the league for a long time, and he's put in his dues. There could come a time where, and I think that's what a lot of fans should look at. Like the Kings are going to have some options because there aren't that many jobs that are going to open up. The jobs that do open up are going to be better jobs than the Kings. There's a good chance of that. We've heard possibility of Philadelphia, we've heard possibility of Utah, we've heard like likelihood of New York, and then of course the Lakers. But that's probably it. Like there's not gonna be what there. There's not that many jobs, and so if these dudes do want to get back in the league or they do want to become head coaches again, I think the Kings are going to have some really good options, and hopefully, they choose the right path. Was there something Monte had something to say about like the type of coach? Was there anything that stood out to you about that?
Not specifically, no. I think he got asked if he preferred somebody that had experience, and he didn't commit to either side, really, with that answer. I don't think I didn't get too much from his response to that question. I don't know if you did.
No, I mean, almost everything we asked, when we asked about the coaching search, it was like, these aren't the droids you're looking for. Like, Monte just kept doing, like,
We're going to do a
crazy
comprehensive search, which is good because that hasn't happened in years prior sometimes, right?
Okay, we got a couple of minutes here. I'm going to dispel some of that, and I'm just going to tell people, okay, listen to me here. Vlade Divac did an extremely extensive search for a head coach. He brought in 12 different candidates, if I'm not mistaken. Some of those candidates he brought in as many as 3 times, and I think he had whittled his list down to like either 4 or 6 head coaches. He had taken weeks to do this, and he brought in all kinds. He had interviews with all kinds of coaches. And on a Friday, the Kings got a call that said, hey, Dave Joerger might be available, and he might be leaving Memphis. Would you like an interview with him? Kings ownership said yes, flew him in on a Saturday, and on Sunday he was signed. And Vlade had this whole book of things of people he had already interviewed, already worked on, and then boom, Dave Joerger's a coach. So when we get to a couple of years later, they knew Dave Joerger wasn't going to be back for a long time. I know that. Dave Joerger told me that he thought he had 20 games on day one. He told me the first game of the season, I got 20 games and then they're going to fire me. And of course they started winning and they couldn't fire him. And then they had an article written out on Yahoo that talked about how Dave Joerger's job was still in jeopardy even though he was winning. Anyway, we got to the All-Star break that year. Everyone in the league knew that Luke Walton was getting fired by the Lakers at the end of the season. Everyone knew it. And everyone in Sacramento knew that Vlade was going to hire Luke. So you can say, no, they didn't do their due diligence. They didn't interview a bunch of people. But at that point, Luke Walton was still a very good young, up-and-coming head coach. And Vlade knew that he was going to have other suitors, and he jumped on him the day the season ended, and they brought him in. And I know that some people are like, oh, you should have had a huge search and all that stuff. Like, Luke was coming off the stretch where he won a ton of games with the Warriors. He was coming off the stretch where he had led like a really bad young Lakers team for 2 years. And then in his third year with the Lakers, he gets LeBron James. They're in the playoff hunt. LeBron James gets hurt. They miss the playoffs. LeBron misses playoffs for the first time. I'm not saying Luke was a brilliant hire. I'm not saying he was a horrible hire. What I'm saying is that the way it played out is different than most people thought. And Vlade had every right and every motivation to get that deal done quickly. And I'll just tell you, was it last season where the Minnesota Timberwolves literally fired their coach in season and had a new coach that was an assistant on a different team by the end of that night? Like, these things happen. When you have somebody that you want as your head coach, these things happen. And so, like, if
you get it right, nobody's talking about it.
Yeah, if you get it right, no one's talking about it. Exactly. So, again, like, I get people who keep saying, oh, they didn't have an exhausted coaches search. They did. It was just 2-3 years earlier, and they had an exhaustive search. And Vlade learned the hard way that if you leave a door open for someone above you to hire a coach, then that's fine. They will. And that's what happened. And he didn't want that happening again. And he aggressively got his guy. His guy ended up being the wrong guy. But I'll also tell you that if Vlade didn't get fired because of the bubble, there's a good chance the Kings make the playoffs last year under Luke Walton, because they would have brought back Bogdanovich. They would have brought back Alex Len. They probably would have brought back Kent Bazemore, and they missed the playoffs by 2 or 3 games. So, yeah, these things, it's always like this much with this team.
Yeah.
All right, let's hear it, Brenden. Let's hear it.
All right.
The business of basketball.
The business of basketball. This started with Darvin Ham being a thing, and I'd been meaning to ask you. We're going to start with a question. Have you ever tried to do some sort of content that's a play on your last name?
No.
No? James, we have to have a segment that's a play on your last name.
Well, I mean, we did do Going Ham on
Okay.
NBC Sports.
I have a list of ideas, and Going Ham is one of them, so I'm glad that's been used.
No.
And by the way, you had Sean Cunningham, and you guys didn't have a ham segment. Like, I was like,
No.
what is... How?
Well, and I'll tell you this: like when when you grow up and your last name is Ham, you kind of get over it. You're like,
Fair
okay,
enough.
look, I'm getting over it. There are
Do you
worse
like
last
Ham?
names out there, but there's also like I've been like it's my last name. Like it's been my last name for a long time, and so yeah. I mean, I get more like aggravated when people spell it wrong. It's really not that hard, and a lot of you spell it wrong. Gotta tell you.
It's a tough one.
Okay, let's hear it. What do you
I'm
got
glad
for
that
me?
Going Ham's already used, because that's the best one. By
It
the way,
is.
do you like ham?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Jambon.
Just making sure. All right.
Jambon.
I have a couple. And request also, listeners, in the comments on YouTube, or if you want to message us on Twitter, let us know some of these names. James, I'm like, we need to have a ham segment somewhere in here. We need to play on words.
All right.
I pulled up a couple, or I tried to think of a couple punny ones here. We have I Ham Legend. They're
Okay.
tough ones. They're tough ones. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, that's a stretch. That's a stretch.
Not Def Jam Records, but Def Ham Records.
Okay.
It's tough. It's tough.
Well, that would be good because we could go over like stats.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So go ahead.
Space Ham. It's not a good one, but I felt like it was funny to throw it out there to play on Space Jam.
Okay, that's a stretch, but go ahead.
That's a tough one. Yeah, same with NBA Jam. Came out NBA Ham. It's not good
Oh
enough.
no, see that's good. I like that.
You think that one's all right?
Yeah.
Okay. Last one I have. Do you know who Will I Am is?
Yeah.
Yeah. Will I Am.
Okay. Okay. I'm not sure. Like maybe. Like
I
Black
think
Eyed
the
Peas,
I
right?
Ham Legend player of the game. After these pods, the player of the week.
I don't know, Brenden. It's funny. Like if you see me and Doug together, or
Oh
like
my
even-
God, James! It's my favorite thing ever. The first time I heard it, we were in a practice, and Doug screams from across the full gym, "Hamster!"
he calls me hamster, or he calls me ham sandwich, or sometimes he just calls me sandwich.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So and on occasion there are people that call me ham bone, but that's not one of Doug's. Doug has a whole thing. So when we had a pod together forever, he would have these like he'd call me different names, and he does like I bring Doug coffee if we have a morning practice because when Doug and I were in the booth together, after we did pregame, we would go and get our coffee together and then like go sit and watch the game. So like we are good friends. We so anyway, yeah, this is interesting. We can think about some of these. Like I'm gonna need to see
with
the
something
list.
good.
I'm a visual learner, so I need to actually see them like in writing. Like the Going Ham segment, that's fine. We can if I'm gonna go off on somebody, that's totally fine. We can have a Going Ham segment. But like some of those, like NBA Ham, okay,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see.
I still will do more theory crafting here on some
All right.
names,
All right.
but I'm
Yeah.
sure listeners will come up with something. YouTube comments, let us know.
That's awesome.
I need help here.
Okay.
I will
he
make
needs
it
help.
happen. Yes.
All right. Excellent. All right. Well, look, it's been a long couple of days. There has not been a lot of sleep. Apologizing for a lack of Sunday musings. To be honest with you, there was a different story that I had to chase like all morning long on Sunday, which did not come to fruition. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you what I was chasing all day Sunday. But it ruined my whole morning and cost me all the time to do Sunday musings. Then I had to shift gears and write the the Alvin Gentry coaching obituary, which again, you got to pre-write these things so they're ready for Monday morning because we knew that was going to happen. I had actually, like I said that before, like I had my Luke Walton one written forever. I like just had to keep changing stats and stuff. And those things don't feel good. And but I think he was my, let me see, Westfall, Smart, Malone, Corbin, Carl, Yeager, Walton, and Gentry. That's my 8th head coach in 12 years. And there will now be a 9th head coach. And so, yeah, interesting
I'm
times.
already going to be on 3.
What?
Actually,
Man,
you could say the same Davion Mitchell.
Davion Mitchell. You and Davion Mitchell are on your 3rd head coach.
Yeah, the rookies. Me and him with them Kobe work ethics.
Yeah, you guys with your Kobe work ethic. You guys with your Kobe work ethic. I haven't seen anything since Kobe Bryant and you and Davion when it comes to work ethic. It's
only
awesome.
three. The
Yep,
obvious
that's
trio.
it. That's it. All right. That's gonna do it for this edition. Brenden, do you have any final thoughts that are not ham related?
No. All my thoughts are ham related, James.
Okay.
Are you gonna be watching the play-in closely these next 2 days?
Meh.
Do you have any like how do you go about playoffs? Do you have you used to do Warriors stuff. Do you still kind of keep up with that or?
I usually have a policy that I take the first round off because, we got to do recap stuff. We got to do player recaps. We got to start prepping for draft. We got to.
You have a policy that you take the first round off because they never make the first round. So
well, no, that was my policy. That was my policy with NBC that I didn't have to do the first round. I didn't have to cover the first round. And then after the first round, I had to cover all over the place. And so when I had to cover Warriors. So for me, like you need time to decompress. And like I talked to Doug this morning and Doug was like scribbling down stuff in his notebook and going through his notebooks and digesting the information that he had taken in all season long because he didn't have time to during the season. And for me, a lot of this is kind of the same. I usually go through like a digestion thing, and then it's almost like I ate too much and I need a nap for like 4 or 5 days where I just kind of want to shut it off and I go through a little. It's always slightly depressing, like when it's over and the pace and the like having to be there all the time and all that stuff. It's over and you're just like, okay, there's nothing going on. Like now I got to pick myself up and get back to content creation. And so it's just different. But I'm excited. And I love what we're doing here on the Kings Beat. And I love that we're going to do the podcast twice a week all summer. We're going to do draft coverage. We're going to do free agency coverage. We're going to do player recaps like what we did with Donte DiVincenzo last week. We're skipping over one this week because we got some other news. We had some other news to cover just a little bit. But yeah, Brenden, have you liked this is your first season? Are you survived? Are you okay?
I'm good. Yeah. I think I said this on a pod already, but there was a lot of moments of thinking I'm in a rhythm and then quickly realizing, man, I am not, or something would throw me off and it would take a while to get it back and it would only be temporary again. But I think definitely a lot of moments of, there's just a lot of things that doing it a couple times over, you just get more comfortable. And that's, at least to me, maybe this is just how I function, is that reps are what make me most comfortable. So I think just getting my feet wet with a lot of these things was really, it's a lot of new, a lot of asking questions and figuring things out, but I feel like I made progress. And the offseason is probably going to be a little more comfortable for me because that's more so what I'm used to, actually, is being home and making content.
I think it's the transition you'll find is that you have to learn how to do your job without quotes. And so the content creation is different. It's more analytics. It's more digesting information and breaking stuff down. It's just different. And so, yeah, it's fun. You got to see just about everything in your rookie season covering the team. You got to see what became like your guy and Tyrese Halliburton get traded. You got to see COVID. You got to see a veteran that has always been solid completely melt down and just disappear in Rashawn Holmes. Between injuries and COVID and personal issues, you got to see a monster trade and a complete changeover in the roster. You got to see a coach get fired and a second coach step in and not be able to turn things around. You got to see coaches talk about quitting and coaches talk about passion, and you got to see a rookie take his huge steps late in the season. You got to see De'Aaron Fox look like a superstar and Sabonis look like an all-star. Yeah, like you got to see this was a good potpourri year of everything that could possibly get thrown at you.
It definitely was. And I'm going to steal Davion Mitchell's line. When he got asked, how does it feel to not be a rookie anymore? They said he's not a rookie. He's not a second-year guy or no longer a rookie until next season starts.
Oh, so you're a rookie all summer?
I'm still a rookie. Well, today and yesterday with De'Aaron and Domas, or today with Monte, McNair, it still feels like part of this season in a way.
Yeah, and it's taking it in a different way. Like you have to, your questions have to change sometimes they've got to be more pointed. Sometimes they've got to be more difficult, and sometimes they've got to be extremely delicate. And like tiptoeing through the season, learning things, little nuances, and yeah, it's fun. It's fun. I'm glad you got to go on this adventure this season, and I had a good time, like being out there with you every day.
Thanks, man. Yeah, you were definitely helpful in the whole process, and I'm not sure if it was a good thing that I asked a coach about hiding a player, or if that's something I'm not supposed to do, because it was a bad reaction at first, but it kind of worked out. I'm not gonna lie.
That did work out for you. That did work
in a
out.
very
I don't
weird
know if
way.
I don't know if I would like pull that one out again
No?
next year.
No? Okay.
Maybe not. Maybe not. You do you. You do you.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think one time I messed around, jokingly said a question. I think it was between you and Sean, and I think your reaction was kind of like that. Not that specific question, was something else, and Sean was like, I don't know, I kind of want him to ask it, and we'll be there listening the whole time.
We're there for you. We're there for whatever happens
enough.
next. That's
Fair
right.
enough.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Kings Beat podcast. So make sure to give us a thumbs up. Make sure to give us a subscribe. Jump on the Kings Beat. We're going to be doing this all summer long. We're going to be doing all kinds of crazy content all summer. That is the plan. We're sticking to it, and we're super excited. Health issues are almost all the way over and past, although I'm going to be on blood thinners forever, which not forever, but for another like 70 days or something. But outside of that, like this thing is going to be rolling, and we're super happy with the way the Kings Beat is taking shape, and we're glad that you're here alongside us for the ride. So for Brenden Nunes, I am James Ham. We'll see you on Thursday. Thanks for tuning in to the Kings Beat.